Our 68th sequel, the visit of the Bishop of Zanzibar in 1905. There will be a small amendment to the 1900 agreement, and the Nandi Rebellion in Kenya comes to an end, and we shall see what happens to the Barlow family because of the end of the Nandi Rebellion. I'm Christopher Amos Chikomekontambi. In these sequels, celebrating the Church of Uganda at 150, a celebration of our history of the Church and the state. And so in 1905, the Diocese of Uganda received its first apostolic visitor, a bishop. He was the Bishop of Zanzibar. The Bishop of Zanzibar was 48 years when he arrived in Uganda in 1905, and his name was Bishop John Edward Hine. He arrived in Uganda for an official visit, call it episcopal visit. He was a doctor of medicine by profession, and he had been ordained under the university's missionaries. And as you know, the university missionaries are high church. Don't forget, the high church follows many traditions that resemble those of the Roman Catholic Church. And when he was ordained and registered under the university missionaries, he was deployed to Likoma Island in Lake Malawi. He served there for a very long time, and it was from there that he was consecrated a bishop, the Bishop of Likoma, in 1896, all the way to 1901. He was then transferred to Zanzibar as bishop, and he served all the way to 1907. But now, in 1905, he visits Uganda. There is something about the High Church. As much as they are closer to the traditions of the Roman Catholic Church, they therefore have a higher appreciation for the dead people memory. And so the bishop, on arrival in Uganda, he was shocked to learn that the Church Missionary Society, or the Low Church for that matter, the Low Church being the more Protestant, the more reformist against the Roman Catholic doctrines and traditions, the Low Church, they had never bothered to honor the first native martyrs on the continent of Africa, and these were the martyrs of Busega. As a matter of fact, I should substantiate that word and say the first native martyrs in sub-Saharan Africa, not the continent of Africa. Northern Africa had earlier had martyrs during the persecution of Christianity before Constantine took over or allowed Christianity. Therefore, not in the continent of Africa, but in sub-Saharan Africa, the very first martyrs were these ones of Busega. So they were very famous. They had been recorded in the Christianity books, and therefore he was surprised that there was no memory for them. Now, at Busega was a very great swamp and a bush when he arrived, and therefore Bishop Tucker was in fact very ashamed. Both with Archdeacon Ernest Miller, they accompanied the bishop, Bishop Hine, to look for the bones of the three pioneer Uganda martyrs. And this they did on the 22nd of May, 1905. Particular Aprokagwa gave them guides and witnesses who had witnessed the martyrdom, and they combed through the long grass and the bushes to the actual spot. And the actual spot had some wild palm trees, but they were able to find the bones which were unburied 20 years later. Now, the medical doctor, who was also a bishop, began to identify the bones. He was able to fit them into place. He got the thigh bones, as well as those of the pelvis. He got the arm bones, the legs bones. He got the jaw bones. Remember, those are the ones with teeth, and the teeth were intact, but the skull were in pieces and fragments. And so they dug a grave and they buried the remains of Yusuf Rugarama, Makko Kakumba, and Noah Serwanga. Banange, thanks to the visiting Bishop of Zanzibar, Bishop John Edward Hine, and shame on fallen Bishop Alfred Tucker and the entire Low Church Missionary Society of the time. I therefore want to say the following, that the visit of the High Church Bishop of Zanzibar exposed the Low Church attitude towards the memory of the Uganda matters. Therefore, we should thank Bishop Hine 2 years before he retired. We thank him for, because of him, Busega Matters Memorial is a beaming tribute of the glory of God. Now, despite the Zanzibar Bishop Hine challenge, the Low Church Missionary Society never got interested in the Namugongo Matters Memorial either. It took the Mill Hill missionaries, being Catholic or being Roman Catholics, and the entire block 185, whose landowner was Tefiro Chisoso Onkole. It took those two to have the memory, or to have the Church Missionary Society get interested. But more so after the native Anglican Church had become actually Church of Uganda in 1960 and beyond. So before that, the Church Missionary Society was not very interested. So all I can say is that shame on the Low Church when it came to the memory of the holy dead of Uganda. Shame on the Church Missionary Society. Now, so much for the visit of the Bishop of Zanzibar. Let us now see what was happening elsewhere in the church. Budu. A Budu area was dominated by the White Father adherents, the Roman Catholics. However, catechists like Leo Beni, Muereza had been posted at Kajuna, and the church missionary station began as early as 1899. So by 1905, there were 7 lay readers, fully commissioned, and they were added to the Kajuna Church Missionary Station. And therefore it expanded. It expanded to Kianja, where they created a new Church Missionary Society station. And that was on the road from Masaka to Bukakata Port. Still, on the state of Uganda, there was an amendment on the 1900 Buganda Agreement to change something about the case laws involving cultural things in Buganda. And therefore the 1900 agreement was amended in such a way that now the agreement recognized that the rulings of any cultural judicial decision could be appealed against in the Protectorate High Court. However, now the amendment got a name. It was called the Buganda Judicial Agreement 1905. the judicial system of the Koti ya Kisekwa, to be truthful. Koti ya Kisekwa was now fully recognized, but all its decisions were subject to appeal in the protectorate government or in the protectorate of Uganda High Court. So that is the amendment there. And now finally, in this sequel, let us address the end to the Nandi Rebellion in 1905. The Nandi leader, who was also not only the political leader, cultural leader, but also the religious leader of the Nandi people, was called Okoyot Koitalel, and he was killed by the British soldiers, and so were all his chiefs. And all these people were killed during a meeting called by the British. So you see, the British were true killers, true killers, unashamed. Okay, there was a rebellion in Nandi. The Nandi killed so many British soldiers, blah, 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 blah. But now, you call people to a meeting to discuss peace, and you kill them, and you kill all of them. So that was the British for you. The Nandi were opposing being gazetted in a reserve north of their country to allow European settlers to move in. They therefore raided the settler farms, who then fled the areas from October 1905. They attacked the British fort at Kaptumo, but the British used mercenaries to push the Nandis back, and the Nandis were finally defeated and forced to live in their camps north of their country, especially after their leader had been killed by the British. The rebellion had a connection to Uganda. Why? Because one of the British officers involved, Captain Cuthbert Charles Lambert Barlow, whose son John Barlow was at the time in Uganda's home of Mikase Matimba, the Makamba. And therefore, the connection is that Lambert was supposed to pick his child, but he didn't know that the child was at Makamba. Why? He had left his boy at Frere Town, the headquarters of the Church Missionary Society near Mombasa. So, Lambert Barlow, who was fighting in a British 10th Regiment that was in charge of fighting the Nandi, wound up its work and began to move back to Mombasa. And of course, on arrival in Mombasa, Lambert Barlow was not able to find the son he left there. And as we shall see in future sequels, that had a repercussion. The victory of the British 10th Regiment, in which Captain Cuthbert Lambert served, meant that these soldiers had to return to Europe. And because Barlow did not know that the son is in Uganda, he went to the other side to the coast. However, there still remains a $1 million question. Why did he leave his son with the missionaries at first? Anyway, they came on holiday, they recruited him to go to war, he was not prepared for it. Maybe that is understandable. So he left them with the missionaries. Fine. But now, after the war, you are in Mombasa, you are told the son is in Uganda, and there is a train, you can catch a train, at least to Kisumu. Why not travel to Uganda and get your son? The missionaries had given the son to Mikase Matimba, hoping that they'll find Lambert Barlow in Uganda, but Lambert Barlow had already left for the Nandi War. Now the Nandi Rebellion has ended, 1905, and Lambert returns to Mombasa, fails to get his son, but chooses to travel back home. without the son. On arrival in England, he's signed into the 1st Battalion at Lincolnshire, where again he takes no interest in coming back to Africa to look for his son. And many years later, in 1914, the World War breaks up, and Lambert Barlow, that battalion, the British 1st Battalion, lands in Europe, and they join the gallant attack on the German trenches. He gets killed in action at Weister on the 1st of November 1914. He gets buried at a place called Yepa in Belgium. And therefore, the Barlows are now part of Uganda. They are part of the Mikase Matimba. They have been absorbed into the Buganda society, assimilated, I think is the word. They are now Baganda, belonging to the Mamba clan of Mikase Matimba. When they are asked their ancestry, as much as they'll talk about Lambert, the majority of them will end up mentioning the name Mikase Matimba as their ancestor. For indeed, he became their ancestor. And that is sequel 68. We thank God for our blessings.